Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the future landscape of the Vietnam rooftop solar market. I'm really excited about this workshop. I've been looking forward to it all week. We have a great set of panelists and a very important topic. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time introducing it. I think everyone knows the reason why the Vietnam energy market in general is hot. We've had massive, impressive economic growth driven partially by a manufacturing boom that's created really unprecedented demand for energy that the country is currently still struggling to provide. I think we all know that last year Vietnam sort of jumped to the top of the global renewable energy bracket, sort of leapfrogging regional neighbors and bringing on over 4 gigawatts of utility scale solar power. This is a massive success for the country and really a great platform. However, I think we know that transmission constraints are limiting the ability to continue to roll on and bring out new large-scale projects, but that is expected to change in the future. But Vietnam does struggle to fill up its need for massive power. Like the rest of the world, Vietnam is hopefully backing away from coal, but there's limited remaining hydropower and natural gas reserves. Large LNG projects are on the way, but those will take some time. The large-scale solar is in flux. Wind is taking a bit longer to come on and has huge procurement challenges ahead of 2021 and changes and extensions of the feed-in tariff program. But at the same time, there are favorable new regulations and economics now make solar rooftops, a wave of solar rooftop development possible, and that's why we're all here today. On April 6th of this year, just last month, the MOIT announced Decision 13 approving a new feed-in tariff and opening up several different options to sell solar power to EVN or directly to end users, including a 8.38 cent US cent per kilowatt tariff for rooftop solar sales to the grid. So a lot of developers are exploring this option, but also exploring direct sales to industrial users, similar to the approaches we've seen in Thailand and India. So this is really an exciting market. We're at the very beginning steps of it, and I think we've got a great set of presenters to talk about all of these opportunities and where the market is and how developers are moving to take advantage of it. The presenters today will start off with Nguyen Hai Duc. He's a renewable energy advisor at USAID who will provide an overview of the sector and an update on what's happening on the ground in Vietnam. Ron Sheng, the Vice President of International Sales and Services at GoodWe. Gavin Atta, who's the CEO for Total Distributed Solar Generation in Asia. And Milan Koev, the founder and CEO of Hexagon Peak. In a minute, we'll start off with Duc's presentation, which is, I think we'll hear from someone, a Vietnamese expert on the ground who's been heavily involved in this business since the beginning. I'll also let you know that during the presentation, you can submit any questions by hitting the Q&A button on the left of the screen during the presentation. We'll be paying a lot of attention to questions that come in from the audience, really with the objective of making this as participatory as we possibly can and addressing the questions that we know you all have. And to add a little bit to the incentives there, I'm very happy to announce that the sponsor GoodWe has prepared 6 $50 Amazon gift cards for the most active participants in the Q&A session. So that's a little bit more reason to add your input. Finally, what I'll do is introduce PV Box and Energy Box. Many of you may know PV Box and Energy Box have become one of the leading conference organizers in the region, doing events all over Southeast Asia, Asia, and the world. PV Box is a vertically integrated media company dedicated to renewable energy. It's based in China, but one of the top 3 most influential medias in the domestic market, but is again active around the region. To enhance business cooperation across the land and inland and promote green energy, PV Box events are held around the world. Again, I'm sure many of you have seen and participated in these events. So I'm very happy to join PV Box and to move towards kicking off the event today. Many of you may know me. I'm a partner in Vector Energy Advisory. We're a strategy consulting and financial advisory firm that's expert in Asian markets, renewable energy, and functional business skills that enable companies and funds to grow businesses and develop investments in the Asian clean energy sector. So with that, what I'll do is kick off the presentation today. Turn the floor over to Nguyen Hai Duc and start today's webinar.
Thanks everyone, and thanks Jack specifically for introducing me to and allow me to be the first speaker of the day. And it's very great honor for me to stay here and talk to you and introduce you about the recent policy updates, as well as how the rooftop market has been developed so far. And my name is Nguyen Hai Duc in full. I'm currently act as the renewable energy advisor for USAID Vietnam Low Emission Energy Program. So before I go into my presentation today, I would like to have a brief introduction about VLEAD programs. So we are a 5 years, but actually now 5.5 years program funded by USAID that our utmost target is to promote the low emission energy program. We have different approach by both in the demand and supply sectors by improving or promoting the energy efficiencies in some way. But for my current role as renewable energy advisor, I focus more on promoting the RE. So we are a part of the team to develop the PDP-8, the Power Development Plan 8, as well as personally I'm involving in the direct power purchase agreement program, pilot programs, together with the national rooftop promotion programs that we support the MOIT and the government of Vietnam, but to scale up the development of rooftop market in Vietnam. And another part of that, we'll not only work with the public sectors, but with the government of Vietnam, related ministry or related agencies. We also support the private sectors. As you might know, in the last year, we have support 5 solar utility scale projects to achieve the COD and enjoy the FIT of 9.85 US cent per kilowatt hour. But we also support one wind projects to achieve the COD and enjoy the 8.35 cent per kilowatt hour. And this is the brief information about the national rooftop promotion programs that I will keep it here, and would like to introduce you in a different context. And coming to my presentation today, I will focus on 2 sections. The first one that you are all looking for is the brief on the Decision 13 that has been released since April 6, as has introduced. And also we will not deep dive, but we will have a look into the decision to see what it have brought to the market and what are the limitations or barriers that's still holding the market. And the second part will be the market outlooks, where we will go through what happened in the market, what is the speed of development, and the current business model that has been implemented in the market so far. So we have been all waiting for the Decision 13 to come out after 9 months of expiration of Decision 11 and Circular 16. And so previously, if you have followed the Vietnam market, you can see that there are different ways of defining rooftop, or different ways of having different zonal mechanism or different supporting mechanism and having different zonal fit. But at the end of the day, and when it released in Decision 13, you only have one unique nationwide fit-in tariff applied for rooftop solar projects, which is 8.38 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity that you injected to national grid, to EVN grid, let's say. And it will apply for the projects that achieve the COD, the commercial operation date, from July the 1st of 2019 until end of December 31st, 2020. And the Decision 13 has come up with a new definition of rooftop, which is understand to be more specific and more strict in compared to the general definition in Decision 11 and Circular 16, that It is a separate guideline and separate definition section for the rooftop, and it defines rooftops solar as a power system with photovoltaic panels installed on the roof of construction works, and it has to have the capacity of less than or equals to 1 megawatt peak, and it could be directly or indirectly connected to EVN or electricity purchaser with the connection voltage. I'm not sure whether you see it here. Maybe the banner overlapping, but it with the connection voltage of less than 35 kilovolt. And I just want to highlight that kind of definition only apply to projects that intend to sell the electricity to the grid. And you may see that the definition of construction works may be a bit too general. So I have put it, a reference to circular number 3 of 2016 from the Ministry of Construction for your clearer understanding. And Decision 13 for the first time has introduced the new electricity off-taker to the people. Previously, EVN as the sole electricity utility in Vietnam is the sole electricity trader. But for now, the government of Vietnam has provided a new definition which allow third parties to act as the electricity seller, and the electricity buyers can also purchase from electricity from that third party. So we don't we don't limit the third party ownership models for rooftop anymore. And with that new definition, the government of Vietnam has provide and allow rooftop solar power system to have one open business model that you can apply almost every model, like net billing, buy all, sell all to the grid, half or 30% and 70%. They are pretty flexible at this moment, and you can sell part or all of the electricity produced to the purchaser, being the purchaser now being EVN or a third party who is an organization or other individuals in case not using EVN grid. So you can now install on the roof of a electricity off-taker like factories and sell directly to the factory under your system. And it has formally accepted the private PPA, where you can do the business-to-business commercial agreement. But it also comes with the Decision 13 also comes with some imperfection or some limitation. At first, it is the lower feed-in tariff. For now, you know that it is about 8.38 cents per kilowatt hour, which is more than 10% less reduction. Let's say it's like more than 10% reduced from the original fit. So it is still workable, but still attractive. But we all know that the higher the better from the investor point of view. And the second thing is it still have the 1 megawatt peak speed bump. The reason why I call it speed bump, because if you build a system under 1 megawatt peak, you mostly feel free and you have a lot of flexibility to implement it. But if your system have the capacity of higher than 1 megawatt peak, you will face several problems like getting into a lengthy and costly process and procedure to include your system into the master plan, and also you need to follow the electricity operation license process, which is pretty lengthy for sure. And the third limitation is the late issue date. As I have has mentioned in earlier, that it has been 9 months from the expiration of the feed-in tariff, first feed-in tariff 1, and I think, as far as I remember, it has been about 15 months from the first draft which I have read. And it also have a very short effectiveness, where the the effective date of Decision 13 only take since May the 22nd, and apply for projects from July 1st, 2019 until end of 2020, which is only 1.5 years. But the combo of late issue and not and short effectiveness will reduce the readiness of the not only the developer or investor but also the factory owner in case they want to sell excess power to the grid, and it may put the rooftop market into another gold rush because you only have about 6 months, including the financial closure, including the construction, EPC, and everything. And it will raise a concern on the system price and the EPC quality and construction because now everyone in the market try to enjoy the fit of 8.38 cent, and we all in a rush, and we have a very limited time. And here's the briefing. Let's say it's like the capture summary of the one that I have mentioned before. That we have one unified nationwide feed-in tariff at 8.38, and we have new separate guidance and definition of rooftop for in Decision 13, and we have accept the other electricity off-taker, private PPA, net billing mechanism, and monthly payment to the amount of electricity that you sell to grid. And we have the speed bump of 1 megawatt peak still remain. The 1 megawatt peak, though there are a lot of organizations like VBF, AmCham, Eurocham have tried to convince the government of Vietnam to uplift the 1 megawatt peak to the 3 megawatt peak, but it's the capacity. But looking in a comprehensive point of view, and the government of Vietnam decided to still keep it the same. And the second section, as I have mentioned before, that I will briefly walk through the current business model that happened in the market, as well as some fact and figures of how the market has responded to the new decision. So at first, there are two main big models in the market. At first is the conventional model, pretty simple and easy. If you have money, you call for EPC contractor and O&M contractor, you build the system on your own rooftop and export the electricity to utilities which means EVN. And if you don't have enough money, you can source it from the bank loan, which you need to pay the interest to the bank. It will maybe extend the payback year, maybe 1 or 2 years in compared to the self-finance cases. And the modern models are also divided into two models. First is the roofless, where a developer or an investor come and do some roof rental and pay the monthly or yearly rent, money cost, and they also call for EPC and O&M to build the system and export the electricity to the grid. You sell to the grid. And the second modern model is, we don't call it leasing anymore. We don't have to, but now we can call it the private PPA because it has been officially accepted or mentioned in the Decision 13, where you will the investor will come to invest, install O&M for the PV system, and you can choose to sell all or part of generated electricity to the roof owner, or you can sell, let's say it's like half 30-70 to EVN, the remaining to EVN, if any. And the payment scheme between rooftop investor and the roof owner is negotiated through a private PPA, and it is a commercial agreement that you can, manage B2B between each other. And for excess power, you sell to the grid and enjoy the fit of 8.38 cents per kilowatt hour. You might need to sign another PPA with EVN. And let's see what the market has achieved so far. Just to move it quick, you can say that since early of 2020, for each month, the market receive about 50 megawatt peak install or achieve COD per month, which means around from 12 to 10 to 12.5 COD per week, megawatt peak COD per week, and it focused mostly in the south and the central, which with the Ho Chi Minh City take the lead, followed by the SPC, the Southern Power Corporation areas, and also the Central Power Corporation, the central part of Vietnam. And in the northern and in Hanoi areas, the contribution is not really much. I think around less than 20 megawatt peak install capacity per area. And you can see now the rooftop system contribution to the generated capacity is coming higher and higher each month. And but it's still a small amount of, uh, of kilowatt hour contributed. And the total installation now reach 573 megawatt peaks as per end of April 2020. And when I read the annual report from EVN in 2019, they expect to achieve 1,000 megawatt peak of install capacity by the end of 2020. And with this speed, and I also expect more and more projects to be installed in the future. So I think 1,000 megawatt peak install capacity by end of 2020 is pretty reasonable and achievable. And this slide shows you the allocation of the install capacity and install system by segment. Pretty reasonable and straightforward that the CNI, the commercial and industrial sector, only contribute to 30% of the total install system, but it contributes about I think about nearly 70% of the install capacity because of the size and the scale and about the attractiveness of the rate. Like commercial player, they are paying for retail tariff of around more than 13 cent per kilowatt hour for the retail tariff. And the on the right is the total installation by city, the top 10 installation by cities. You can see that among all of them, mostly the southern of Vietnam. Actually, 9 of them are the southern of Vietnam, and only uh, has the installation around more than 1,000 cases because in Da Nang we have a lot of industrial park and factories, and it is one of the, let's say, it's like the hub of Vietnam. And in terms of the total install capacity by cities, um, we have a more participation of the central areas like in Gia Lai, Đắk Nông, Đắk Lắk. I think the reason why because the irradiation in that areas is pretty attractive, pretty high, around 1,450 to 1,550. So that's the reason why I see more and more people are trying to install the as many megawatt peak as possible in that areas. And of course, it's the highest number both in this installation and in the install capacity belong to Ho Chi Minh City with more than 6,600 of a system with a total install capacity of about 84 megawatt peak. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. In case you have Any of the questions that I cannot answer right now, you can direct to my mobiles and to my email address as shown on the screen. Thank you very much.
Hi, Doug. Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. That was a really nice insight into the situation on the ground in Vietnam. I think what we'll do is there are some very good questions building up already, but I think what we'll do is save those for the end. And so a lot of them will get answered along the way. But I would like to encourage the audience to continue to submit questions along the way. We are paying a lot of attention in collecting these, and we'll promise to get to them by the end. So with that, I'll turn over to Rong Sheng for his presentation. Welcome, Rong.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to share with you our view on the Vietnam market. In general, overall, Vietnam market is really booming. Even as the one of the biggest emerging market, we see substantial growth on the economic segment. It's a GDP increase around 6.7 to 7%, which is amazing. Given the current situation in the world. Also, we see the equivalent, even higher growth in the energy demand, which is around 8 to 10%, well above the average economic growth. And we also seeing the total installation of energy projects has been reaching up to 5.5 gig. I still remember in last year when we look at some of the analysis and data of the new installation, Vietnam used to be the #2 position in the world. But we will see Vietnam demand for electricity is still going to grow, and we see some of the big gap on the shortage of the supply, which could be 6.6 billion kilowatt hour for next year. And it could be further increased to 15 billion kilowatt by 2023. I think we got the new incentives finally on board for floating, ground-mounted, and rooftop. We see, of course, the rooftop. The government and regulators make a very wise decision to prioritize according to the different levels of incentives. On the rooftop, definitely is on the top. It's just like the name tells. We also see, even with the COVID-19 spread across the globe, the new installation still continues. So up to April, we see 573 the new installation in Vietnam for this year as well. I think then people might be interested why it's rooftop. Because could we doing business across the globe, and we got some reference to share with you. And this is some of our learning in other countries. For instance, when you look at the countries like Japan, in the past, they also started with a big utility, and especially you see huge utility project even 4 or 5 years back, but nowadays they are all focused on the distributed PV segment, particularly on the rooftop. And we also see countries like South Africa. It's also one of the biggest emerging market in Africa. There used to be round 1, round 2, round 3, different IPP tendering for the big ground-mounted project. Of course, still continuing. However, we also see a clear trend that they also going for the rooftop installations. And also the case in China is also quite similar. We don't put the curve in here, but China was also pushing the distributed PV on the rooftop quite heavily in the last couple of years. I think to share with you also now we are seeing something really identical in Vietnam market. We see that even last year when we say Vietnam was number 2 in the world, but it was mainly concentrating on the ground mounted. But nowadays, the rooftop with the rooftops, the policy becoming clearer, and I think that the trend going for rooftop also going to be quite distinct. There's several reasons behind. Just like a limited land. If you go for the ground mounted, then you have to buy the land. This is very obvious in countries like Japan, where people have even small, very small, tiny land. You have belong to different people, and you have a property issues everywhere. And also like South Africa, you see actually the grid very saturated. It's also very weak. To connect the big solar system to the grid is always an issue. Even in China, you see self-consumption will be more flexible. People doing on rooftop, you easily can get the approval installations. This is also serving for the demand of try to be very close to the end user, and then you can also connect to your grid easily. It's also kind of easy solution for the upgrade of system for the future energy storage system. So that's the reason why I would say Vietnam government, I think it's making a very wise, educated decision here to refocus on the rooftop projects. And of course, another reason is also on the transmission. If you do the big utility in very remote area, the transmission is also a challenging for the transmission line, how to transmit out those electricity to the center of the country, which could be very power hungry. Okay, then I will just introduce Goodwe briefly here. Goodwe, one of the leading companies for inverters. We just focus on all the inverter-oriented technology. We are very focused on the R&D. We have more than 200 people R&D staff working in 3 places. We have 3 R&D centers. In Suzhou, nearby Shanghai, one is in Shenzhen, and the other we have a JV in Australia, focused on the smart energy solution. We have 2 brand new plants. In Suzhou and Guangdong in Anhui province. We got a very good production line now. Serving for a very high demand of production. We also setting up the local service in the overseas market, particularly in Vietnam, because we see the market is booming. We are setting up our service center in Vietnam to serve the market in the long run. A couple of the other things I just want to highlight is that one is we focus very much on the quality. We got one of the award I just want to highlight is TUV Redline all quality matters. This is actually very prestigious award in the world by TUV. We are the only one who got this award 4 years in a row for different products. Another one is that we got one of the product. We also got the Red Dot Design Award in Germany, for their design. We have been in China for many years. We have been in the position of the number 1 position for China distributed PV segment, particularly on the rooftop, for a few years in a row. In the meantime, we are growing our business globally, and our philosophy is also going global and being localized. That's the reason why we're setting up a lot of presence locally in Europe, in South America, in India, also in Southeast Asia. Just continue on the global ranking. We have just been awarded ranked as the number 1 hybrid PV inverter supplier by Woods Magazine for last year. So it's a high recognition of our quality and volumes on the storage side. We are on the top 4 position by IHS for 3-phase string inverter, which have been mainly used on the rooftop project as well. In general, we got Wood Magazine top 7 inverter supplies overall out of all the central and string inverters in terms of revenue. And another thing I just want to highlight is also we got the exclusive global partnership with the GE. We are the licensing partner for GE to do the business globally, on an exclusive basis. And that's also they select us out of more than 300 supplies. And this is something quoted by the senior managing director of the GE for this GE licensing partnership. They conclude that the group is finally the right choice to be selected as their partner. Yeah, just want to share also a few case studies, particularly in Vietnam. Then we also learned that 1 megawatt, below 1 megawatt, could be the somehow the focus going forward. And we have been accumulating quite an experience in Vietnam as well. Look at the different size at the 1 megawatt, and also globally we have done even more than 1 megawatt, 2 megawatts is all rooftop, big rooftop. In India, in South Africa, in Canada Solar factory, just close to our factory, in Turkey, Brazil. For last year, we used like a 60 kilowatt MT series with the oversizing capacity. We use for 1 megawatt, we just use 14 units to constitute this 1 megawatt system. You look at some of data analysis, you can see, thanks to our quite fantastic design, we actually have a quite long operation period time. The startup could be, we start up at very low voltage, and that means start our inverter working very hard. They start early and finish the work very late. So the equivalent operation time is almost, at the full load output power per day is around 7 hours. Considering the very excellent radiation condition in Vietnam, people always think that exceeds that expectation even. A second, there's some issues on the, let me. Okay. So you can see we also do, this is come from the real data. In one of the plant we can have actually 14,835 US dollar as a revenue. On a monthly basis, you can easily get the 1 year income, and which means I think everybody can do a basic calculation. You are looking really a very short period of time to get your investment return. But longer operation time of our inverter to bring you increase between 0.3 to 0.5% high yield. This is also just to add it on, because especially for the Asian countries, you normally have very hot ambient conditions, and also very humid. That's also the challenge for the device itself as well as the components. So we selected the out of the state of the components to be filled up in our products. Like we use the IP68 protection for our fans, and we also the whole design is just IP65, and also we have 50 degree still full load without degradation, This also was verified by third-party TUV lab, especially one of the key customers in India came to check, and they want this 50-degree to be really verified. We got that third-party just witnessed this testing. Of course, for the especially a little bit bigger commercial CNI projects, and you look at the robust design and also cost-effective solution will always be the successful factors. We have up to 50% of DC oversizing and 10% of AC constant overloading capability. Actually, it's definitely a key to reduce the LCOE. Finally, back to the main products. Of course, we have a different, very comprehensive portfolio. But the products that we are already very mature right now, being used in Vietnam and all the other countries. We have a 50 kilowatt, 60 kilowatt, 80 kilowatt, which is the 4 MPPT. We are also having the HT from 100 kilowatt to 120 kilowatt, which is ready now under the certification right now from varied from 10 MPPT to 12 MPPT. Then we will also going to have upcoming 136 kilowatt at the 500 watts level, which is going to be ready in a couple of months. Then one of the greatest thing that we are doing also, we're going to do the 250 kilowatt HT for the 1500 watts. That's of course that's utility products. However, we also see in some of the countries they are also considering to apply the 1500 watts for the rooftop as well. So here is just overall summary of our product offering. We have residential on the rooftop for sure, from 0.7, the most compact product in the world, to the 10 kilowatt, covering 1 phase and 3 phases. We also have the storage product, hybrid AC coupling, and all-in-one or high voltage and low voltage storage products. We have just mentioned different types of products addressing CNI and the utility scale. So here just to share, one of the differentiation that Goodwe might bring to you is we have we call SAM's portal, which is the monitoring, very smart monitoring system, can share with you all the data, and also you can easily do the statistics, according to the monitoring, and also it's on the complementary basis. But complementary doesn't mean it's just cheap stuff. But really, we have invested more than 50 people working on it from China, and we have another 30 to 40 people in Australia working on the system. This is we have 2 missions in general. This is going to be evolution from today to the future. One we call SAM's industry. This is going to serving different stations, achieving the V2G charging and working with the diesel. We are now setting up all the facilities in the 2 factories. If you have chance to come over, we can do the demo here. It looks really nice. You can get all the data there. And this is also another mission that we have been providing to some of the customer. We do called Sam's Home. This is for the residential, this kind of residential application. We really applied AI technology, and we also produce in-house the data collectors and also meters. Then we collect all the data to do the analysis in order to feedback to the customer the most optimal consumer behavior in order to save energy. That's also going to be a really good case for people in Vietnam, where you future consider the storage and so on and so forth. So I hope, with our experience in Vietnam, I do hope that we we can join hands and contribute to the substantial success of the Vietnam solar market. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ron. I hope everyone can hear me now. I think these first two presentations gave a really good view of the macro issues in Vietnam facing solar rooftops and made it clear that the needs, the economics, and the regulations are all very supportive of a large rollout of solar rooftops going forward. This has all led to a very active bit of work on the ground by the developers, and I think they're experiencing some of the goods that we've heard so far, but also some of the more difficult issues related to making this actually happen. So with that, I'm very happy to turn this over to Milan Koev of Hexagon Peak. Milan has been very active in Vietnam and other markets, developing projects, moving things forward, and I think we'll hear some real unique insights onto what it's really like on the ground from Milan. At the end of this, we will go to questions and be able to address a lot of the good questions we have coming in. And so I do encourage people to please go ahead and ask as many questions as they can on the panel, and we will take account of those. So with that, I transfer the floor to Milan and look forward to hearing your presentation.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for this. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Milan from Hexagon Peak, and we are going to look at a very, very short presentation, which will hopefully give us a little bit more time for discussion. Now, a little bit of introduction about Hexagon Peak. We are a newbie. We just started operations last year in February, and key focus for us was Vietnam. This is where we have established our entity, and we developed CNI and some utility scale solar for the TPPA program, which I'm going to mention a little bit more later on. We are looking at our business perspective in the long term. We hope to be present in Vietnam in the next at least 5 years, and we see major developments happening on the CNI segment, but also in the upcoming DPPA program. A little bit about the market. I think from the developer/investors perspective, it's important to mention a few key things on the market as a overall. I think the key fact, looking at the big picture in Vietnam, is that Vietnam is becoming a manufacturing hub for some of the world's biggest manufacturers in different industries, who have moved away from other countries, particularly China, and started to relocate more towards Southeast Asia, where Vietnam has been chosen to be a good place for them to settle foot. We're looking at probably, I would say, at least 50% of the companies who have committed to RE 100, they have some sort of presence in the country, which is significant, and I think very well appreciated by the Vietnamese government. And so from that perspective, I think DPPA will be something even bigger than Rooftop. Now, on the market itself, I think a lot has been mentioned already so far. I guess we see a rooftop market growing steadily. The expected numbers of one gigawatt this year is probably a little bit conservative, but nevertheless, it's not that simple. We are targeting to have at least some 10% market share. We have already a little bit more than 30 megawatts signed off and starting construction sometime in July. And we're looking at another pipeline of about 50 to 60 megawatts. So there is perspective, there is opportunities, there is also challenges. One of the key challenges is that we still have the 1 megawatt mark, which makes larger projects, not particularly straightforward, still possible and still legal, but with implications. We see, of course, a challenge in the currency risk. This is, of course, well accepted by the market already and well forecasted. But of course, this remains to be the biggest risk in terms of investing in self-consumption or any rooftop projects. The perspectives are ahead because of several reasons. Number one, there is a lot of presence from international investors and developers in Vietnam already. This has been due to the very enormous development of the market in the phase 2 of the feed-in tariff. The phase 1, sorry, when phase 2 came up in April, a lot of those developers / investors realized that there is no sufficient time to connect the projects by the end of the year. Considering the current situation with COVID and so on, things are even more difficult. A lot of capital is being currently relocated to other segments, including CNI, and later on the TPPA program. I think Duke can be sharing with us a little bit more later on how the TPPA is moving on, but I think this will be a very hot topic for the market. On top of that, we have feed-in tariff for rooftop, which is higher than the utility scale projects, and there is no or very limited curtailment risk, which makes things a lot more attractive. The timelines, however, are still challenging. We're having the feed-in tariff expiring at the end of this year, which gives only about 5 to 6 months net time for developers to complete their projects. Again, not impossible, but for a country like Vietnam with the existing current currency or / country risks, I think if we had a little bit longer timelines and considering the current situation with lockdowns, we would probably be in a better position. Now, a little bit on the TPPA program. As I mentioned, we're looking at the pilot program to be published sometime in June, July. Maybe Duke will update us with some latest news if there is. But the pilot program is supposed to be somewhere between 400 megawatt and 1 gigawatt in size. And projects which will be qualified will be at least 30 megawatt, capped to 70 megawatt as it looks. The good thing about the TPPA program is that we will have very credible off-takers who will be eventually in a direct bilateral agreement with the investors or with the developers. EVN will act as a guarantor, intermediary, and the whole structure of the deal becomes much more investable than having EVN as a pure off-taker with the current PPA in place, which everyone is very well aware of, and I don't really need to talk about it. The FEED 2 program was expected by many, and it was published with 10 months delay. And I think this will be out of the 4 gigawatt projects which are in the master plan. I think very few will be connected to qualify for the program. The timelines are really challenging, as I mentioned. We do have a few Chinese EPCs who are committing to those timelines. However, with the current travel restrictions, things are really nearly impossible. So the whole pipeline of let's say 4 gigawatts of those projects that we're waiting for the second round of feed-in tariff, a big part of it will be converted to DPPA. And I think that's going to be next year onwards. That's going to be the biggest segment in the country. So I guess that's it. As I promised, I kept it very short, and I'm very happy to answer a lot of questions later.
Thank you very much for that, Milan. I think that's a great look at what one developer is doing on the ground, and really a look at the EVN side of the feed-in tariff side of the rooftop business. Obviously Vietnam is and continue to be challenging as things are so dynamic, but developers on the ground really are able to get things done. So it's very interesting to hear the strategies you're taking and the success you're having. I think that brings us to another very good presentation, an example of another successful developer who's making some progress on the ground and perhaps using a bit of a different strategy. And so with that, I'll turn the floor over to Gavin, who can talk to us a bit about what Total is doing.
So let me just make sure the presentation comes up. Jack, will you confirm you can see it?
I can see it.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name's Gavin. I've been in solar for 15 years. I moved to the region to do rooftop projects about 7 years ago, and have been starting various companies focused on rooftop. And back in the day, 5-6 years ago, Vietnam kept coming up as an industrial center, and the question was, can you do rooftop projects in Vietnam? And we looked at the grid price, we looked at the price of solar, and we said, it's going to take us some time. So it's quite exciting to be now in a position where I can say we're in construction on several different rooftops in Vietnam for large US-based multinational companies. And we're doing that on a grid parity basis. And so what I mean by that is we are not renting the roof and selling the power to EVN at the feed-in tariff, the subsidy. We're selling power at a discount to the grid and giving customers savings against that power. And the reason that's valuable is that we've seen feed-in tariffs across almost every country except for Japan go on, come off, very difficult to understand what you can, what you can't do, and there's usually a few complexities around how you implement. So happy to talk about that. The background to that is I started a couple of different startups. The last startup I sold to Total end of 2017. So Total Solar Distributed Generation was basically started by this startup. We're operating in 8 countries, projects in 7 countries. We're purely focused behind the meter. So rooftop is the vast majority of what we do. We're looking to scale that in the same way that sort of SunPower or Tesla or SolarCity is doing back in the US. And the only way we can do that is with partners. So the key for me is to find good partners, local partners who can help us to source and construct projects. So that's my focus. So just briefly, because not everybody knows who Total is, it's the biggest company in France. We've got about 209 billion US in annual revenues. And we're known on the oil and gas side. What people tend not to know is that we're a big investor in solar. We built the biggest project in the US at the time. That's the Solar Star project. And the Shams project at the bottom was the biggest project in the Middle East at the time. So the target is to have 20% of our business coming from low carbon, which is really, in terms of the percentage of our business, it's just 20%. But when you put that into the context of renewables, that would make us one of the biggest companies in the world. And we're already at that kind of scale. This is a quick overview of the portfolio. So we have more than 10 gigawatts of operating projects, annual revenues of around 4 billion. We own SunPower, which is one of the best module manufacturers in the world. We're very high efficiency. SAT is a battery company. I won't take you through everything else, but let's suffice to say that we've got 5 hubs around the world doing rooftop projects. We're signing something between 400 and 600 megawatts of rooftop PPAs every year. And we have about 10,000 people doing renewables. So it's really a big battleship that's targeting to do massive renewable investments. On the rooftop side, we're one of the biggest in the world. I'm always a bit nervous to say we're the biggest because there's always potentially something bigger in China or India that you don't know about. But these are some of the customers that we're delivering to now. Better Grow's the second biggest food company in Thailand. We're seeing a lot of interest from US tech giants looking for renewables. We've done a project for Renault Nissan in India. I won't go through the detail, but it gives you some perspective about the kind of companies that we're working with. We're doing the biggest rooftop in Thailand, the biggest rooftop in Indonesia, and hopefully one of the biggest rooftops in Vietnam are all in construction currently. And the biggest portfolio rooftop deal in Thailand is in construction now for about 28 megawatts. That actually is all relatively small compared to what we're doing on our own roof. So this is not for us just about selling something to somebody else that we don't believe in ourselves. We're putting solar on 5,500 facilities across the world, looking to generate savings around $50 million per year. And I think that's one of the elements that I think is poorly understood from a customer's perspective. Very few realize just how much you can save with solar. And we've done 2 sites in Vietnam as part of this initiative. So jumping into specifically what we're doing in Vietnam. So, just to be clear, Total's been in Vietnam for 30 years. We're well established and working on a lot of different projects apart from solar. The way we look at Vietnam is really, we see significant, the problem is that you continue to see demand growing much faster than the supply. And we see a gap of about 6.6 terawatt hours next year, growing to 15 terawatt hours in 2023. And that means that we will see blackouts, just like we're seeing in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And the problem is that it's not just about generation. In fact, we're already seeing very high curtailment from the utility scale solar projects. I saw one report that was saying sort of 50% curtailment on utility scale feed-in tariff projects. And this is the same problem in every country, right? I saw this in the US sort of 10 years ago. The great thing about rooftop is that you don't need the grid, you don't need the transmission, and so you can co-locate. And we can take 10, 20% of customers' power. So that's one key element. The other element, I think, is that while the grid price is very low at the moment, the escalation's been high and is likely to escalate a lot faster. So you're seeing in Vietnam escalation of about 5% over the last 20 years. That compares quite well to somewhere like Indonesia, which is more like 7.6, 7.7%. Realistically, we're going to have to see much more escalation as the government unwinds subsidization of that grid tariff. And we saw last year an increase of 8.36% in a single month as EVM is trying to put themselves in an ability to invest in transmission and distribution and improve supply of power. Just for those who are wondering, what we do is we do all the CapEx, we do all the OpEx, we build a solar system, and we sell power to the customer. Very simple structure. That's the same, we do that everywhere, and they pay us for the power, hopefully. That means that they take less power from the grid, and the grid is more expensive. And in some cases, Vietnam is a good example, excess power can be sold to that customer. We have a few different models. We can do ground mount, rooftop, carports, obviously all of those kind of different designs. We try and keep it as simple as possible. The solar panels being converted through the solar meter into the distribution board. We are doing batteries and hybrid projects as well. They're not in Vietnam, but on islands in Cambodia, for example. So how does this kind of pull together for a customer in Vietnam? So the first thing that we do is a model of a particular site. Here you can see it's a 2 megawatt DC size. We estimate the annual production per year, the kind of yield that we expect to get, and we put together a proposal, and we're going to customers and saying, okay, is this of interest? This proposal generates a $14 million saving for the customer over the life of the contract, over the life of the system. So essentially, at the end of the contract, we're giving the system to the customer. So the customer's seeing a 7.5 cent lease cost, which is an 11% discount against the grid. A 20-year contract, there's no investments from them, there's no O&M from them, we handle everything. So they save $3.2 million during the contract and $14 million during the lifetime. And I suppose the final comment was actually Duke was talking about. So for us, we've got solar savings, and we're expecting to give customers somewhere between 5 to maybe 15% discounts to the grid. Then there is the ability to sell excess power for projects that are sub 1 megawatt. And then there's renewable energy credits. And actually, those renewable energy credits are very important if they can't always be monetized at an appropriate level. So the way we look at it, the solar savings are generating 95% of the value for the customer. So in the previous example, in year one, you were seeing a $23,000 saving there. Whereas the excess power sales, so the ability to sell to the EVN through that feed-in tariff, was only generating around $1,000 or $2,000 per year. And we see quite a lot of people who are really focused on that feed-in tariff. But depending on the type of business that you are, if you've got significant consumption, the savings is more valuable. The other element is pressure from consumers in Europe and US onto brands is then pushing through into suppliers. And there's a massive supply chain in Vietnam of major US brands. They are being forced to implement rooftop solar if they want to continue to sell product to these US brands. And one of the big businesses that we're doing across the whole region is supporting that conversion. The problem with selling the power to EVN is that you're selling the RECs as well, the renewable energy credits. And so in that model, it would not be valid for those US brands or European brands. Curtailment's a big concern we continue to see in Vietnam. And I mentioned that before. And then the requirement to install projects by 31st of December is definitely challenging. Though as I say, we will plan to do that for several projects. The way we look at it, if a customer comes to us in the next month or two, we can get it installed. We usually install projects in 3 to 4 months. We're building 24 sites in the middle of COVID in 6 months in Thailand. So it's possible, but that contracting piece needs to be expedited. So we kind of follow the fresh fields comment here that we structure as lease arrangements where customers are paying for the power that they receive, and that's providing that discount to the grid. So actually, this is a Danone site in Indonesia, which we completed construction on recently. With that, I'll pass back to Jack and open to the floor for any questions.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Gavin. That's a great insight. I think both your presentation and Milan's into to what's actually happening on the ground. And I expect there'll be a lot of questions for all the presenters, but a lot of people who are really curious about what happens when the rubber hits the road here, and all these good programs we hear about groups like yourself start to take advantage of those and see what they can really make happen. Again, I do think we should go to a very lively question and answer, and hopefully we'll have some big interaction here. I do want to continue to encourage people from the audience to keep sending in questions. We've had some, but we could use some more, and we'll definitely be able to address those. I'd like to start off with one question that came from some of the early questions submitted, and as a question that I have. In January, when the government put out a draft Prime Minister's order, they mentioned 4 different business models, the way they categorize those. And I know they've now backed out of that, but you still seem to have some combination of direct sales to EVN, own use, and then some combined projects that seem to work, I guess not exactly as net metering, but plays that role. I wanted to ask how you view these three elements in structuring a business, and what you have to do as a developer to take the best advantage and make the best pathway forward. Are you able to do all of these, or are there times where you prefer just not to attach to use the feed-in tariff program? How does that work when you're actually planning projects?
So I start and then we'll pass to anyone else who wants to.
Please.
I have to admit I've been burnt in a few different places. I've burnt in the US with the subsidies that moved back in sort of 2010, 2011. Then France, Italy. I've kind of moved east over the last 15 years, getting my finger caught. So for me, the critical factor is the project needs to stand up on the basis of grid parity. And so generally what we look for is customers who have significant own consumption demand, that we can provide that the savings on that level. And then we're augmenting, or we're letting the customer augment with any feed-in tariff. So that's the focus. But we do see a lot of customers who have significant rooftop opportunity that would not be able to consume the power, and those solutions we're trying to structure. Though I think Milan might have a better view on that side.
Happy to comment here. Jack, can I clarify? Are you asking about the draft from January? Because honestly,
no, I'm sorry. No, I was making the point that they had discussed 4 business models in January, but they've given that they're not using that now. There's a new regulations, I believe, at the beginning of the month. But certainly feel free to clarify that and correct any errors I may have made.
Well, I think we've seen 3 or 4 drafts before the official regulation came out, and I think they were all different. At some point of time, we were looking at different zones with different levels of feed-in tariff in each zone, which made a lot of sense, simply because in Vietnam we have very large corporations based in the north, closer to the government. So that made a lot of sense. However, it didn't go through. I don't know. I think it is what it is, and we'll be working on that. Going forward, I think we're looking at much more bidding, using the word bidding instead of feed-in tariff. So that's going to be a significant change in the market dynamics. But this can also unlock a lot of opportunities, because this is where we'll see a significant drop in the energy rates. So what we have now is not perfect, but it's workable. And as you can see on the installation numbers, things are picking up, and it's a very short time frame where developers will have to grasp as much as possible market share, given the circumstances and the regulations. So again, it is what it is. It's black on white, and we stick to it.
Great. Is there anything would Rong or Duc like to add anything to that?
Well, it's Luke speaking. Well, I totally agree with Milan that previously when there are the concept of zonal fit that apply different fit in different zone in Vietnam, especially the concept is the place which has the higher irradiation will have lower feed-in tariff, so it will have to promote the areas like in the northern or in Hanoi and northern part of Vietnam will have a higher feed-in tariff in compared to in, let's say, it's like southern areas like Ninh Thuận and Bình Thuận. So it will have to balance the generation and installation of rooftop in different areas in Vietnam. However, since we don't face any of the transmission limitation or the congestion for rooftop. So it means it does not really need to make things more complicated. So I believe that's the reason why the area of MOIT they have suggested one unified feed-in tariff just to simplify the process. But I agree that the market will be more competitive with the zonal concept. Just my personal thought.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I think that does start to set the scene that this is a first step on the rooftop side that the government's putting forward, and it probably will evolve and grow over the years. Long, did you have anything to add to that, or should we move on to another question?
Yeah, I just, I think, no, I agree, this is what it is. And anyway, we have been waiting for this for a very long time. And finally, it's taking root. It's a good thing that we are seeing the incentive. If that's, different tariffs for different regions might be sensible, but of course it's adding up the administrative costs as well. I think anyway, we're seeing the results. It's a good sign. No matter what it is, people will start to pushing for the solar. That's what we have seen clearly from the market. The volume starting to take off. People starting to install. Then finally, it will given the benefit to all the people in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to another very quick, sort of simple technical question that kind of leads into it to other questions, and maybe this is revealing some of my misunderstandings. But is it the situation that you are either able to have an EVN PPA or go a complete non-EVN PPA route and have pure self-generation? And do the EVN rules regarding pricing and timing and other processes for connection only apply to feed-in tariff projects, or how does that work for own consumption projects? And I saw Gavin was nodding there. Did you want to take a first stab at that one?
I'm thinking that it might be interesting to hear Duke first, and then I can augment.
Okay.
Well,
Duke, did you have any thoughts on that?
Let me make it clear that the decision 13 only limits the project, only regulate or stipulate the projects that the rooftop projects specifically to sell the excess power to the EVN grid. So, for example, like they will only apply for the ones who want to sell electricity to EVN at 8.38 cents per kilowatt hour. For the other, let's say it's like private PPA or other aspect that is not under control of this decision, it will be, will not be regulated. Let's say,
yeah,
let make it. That's it.
Yeah.
Let's say it's like, for example, if you have a self-consumption project, you don't really need to run for the within this year, but you have more time to enjoy rather than running for FIT programs in 2020. Is this clear enough?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very good answer, very clear answer.
And actually, we've got we've got a few different options there. So we're actually in construction on one project, which is pure off-grid, no EVN excess. And part of the reason for that is the restriction on the type of connection that you can use to connect to EVN. So it's a bit disappointing that the customer can't sell excess power to EVN because of that. But we think it's relatively minor impact. If we look across all of our customers, very few have that. Then we have the other model, which is a relatively sort of 5%, 3% of the power might be excess, covering Sundays and public holidays. So yeah, fully in line. And we've had various different, we've had 3 or 4 different law firms go through and validate and check. So it's very, very good to hear the expert confirming that.
Okay, so we have 3 law firms and 1 expert, so I think we can count on that information, and I hope. So then the follow-up question to that, and again, this is a question that came in from the audience as well. And I know that Rong did talk a little bit about the technical requirements, but I think the screen may have been covered at that point. As a reference to the audience, the slides will all be available to anybody who wants them. This will be on YouTube, and you can watch it again, so you can pick up anything that we did miss. But I wanted to ask if you could just categorize the technical requirements. What is required to connect to the EVN grid? And then, I think we've seen in other markets, utility connections can be a barrier. They can be the technical connections, but there can also be some political connections or other things that take a bit more time. And I want to ask if you could categorize the nature of the grid requirements and whether that is a significant barrier or is it just a part of doing business?
Right. I think from currently, to be honest, we don't see because this new incentive just becoming valid. We in the past we haven't seen any technical obstacles before. Of course, you're gonna do like 1 megawatt. Probably you just kept this at the 1 megawatt, and you will have to make sure that the system. In terms of output, will not exceed 1 megawatt because when you do, especially as far as from the design perspective, when you have to make sure that the input output will be kept at optimal because sometimes you can even you with the oversizing capability you can overloading your EVM may not be able to allow you to do that. Then you still have to take all this into account when you do the design and when you do the engineering work. I think more practically, I would say because for Vietnam is still quite a young market. The installation we need more professional engineers on the installation side. We have seen quite a lot of issues on during the execution of the contract. That's I think if we know exactly what's the constraints on from the EVM on the design side, and we also try to avoid those issues during the installation. I think then you're gonna have perfect the samples or cases in Vietnam.
Great, thank you. And I do know some of the technical details were in your presentation, and people can get those as well. Would anyone else like to add anything to that? Okay. All right, so now we're actually getting some very, very good questions. Ask and you will receive. The audience has been coming up with some very good issues and making my job easy. I think it's a wonderful tribute to Vietnam that we've gotten this far into the presentation and nobody's mentioned COVID or protests or riots or other things that are happening around the world. But we might as well take a minute and look at whether there are any impacts from COVID, and maybe make this more of a general question. We're seeing that to some degree solar rooftops do compete at the margin with natural gas or other fuels. do you see any prospects for the impacts of COVID and perhaps knock-on impacts on competing energy prices to impact the business? And if so, how serious is that?
Jack, is that a question to me or to the others?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. That's a question to anybody. I'm sort of throwing these out at this point. Perhaps I should be a little more organized, but I think I'll just go with the audience questions, and then I think if one or more people wants to answer, please feel free. If not, don't. But I think we'll be a little bit informal. But please go ahead, or let anybody else go ahead.
Okay, probably I can answer. Answer from my side. From manufacturer perspective, we actually, of course, feel the pressure. China has been the first one who suffered from the COVID. We have been largely affected at the beginning, particularly right before the Chinese New Year. But we are also, for good, we were also one of the first who got the approval from the local government to resume the work. Initially, we got 50% of the production utilized and recovered, but eventually, in the next couple of months, we actually, rebounded very, very quickly, and we got even 120 and 150% of production capacity compared to last year. So the demand, we can see very clearly it's growing. However, it's just somehow on hold due to the spread of COVID across the globe. But I still do believe, when we see Vietnam, for instance, it has less impact. Australia is more or less normal, even though the government is imposing quite strict policy, to have this sort of social distancing, and then it's almost normal. Europe is recovering, and totally, I think, people have under the pressure to get back to work. I think everywhere. So in general, we in my view, the solar business is definitely recovering, and even the demand could exceed what we expect. As far as the energy, the different segments of energy is concerned, I still believe that the rooftop distributed PV will be the most required part of the energy, out of the solar business. We can see, for the utility business, because I just mentioned in my slides as well, there's a lot of conditions you have to take in account, on the land, on the equipment, on the approval, different approvals, on the money from the banks or financial institutes. So that's indeed causing the whole process very long, and also you need to have a lot of human touch to finish it up. However, if you look at the rooftop distributed PV, because it's quite easy, people are easy. Even though we are joking that people now staying at home, you consume more energy at home. So there's I think strong demand to initiate this segment. By the way, it's getting cheaper. People talking about grid parity. I think grid parity is almost there. If you look at it everywhere, I think except for a few countries like China, the cost of electricity is very low. Most of the countries you already achieved that line. So I do believe even with the COVID-19, the distributed PV on the rooftop still could be the primary choice for the people.
Great, thank you. Would anyone like to add anything? Please go ahead.
Yeah. So we've been monitoring this very closely. I fully agree with Rong Shen. There's significant differences on a country by country basis. If you look at how India has reacted to the lockdown, for example, it has been total. That has meant that any project that was in the middle of construction, that it's finished. You have to just wait until the lockdown's clear. Whereas actually Vietnam has moved in a much more flexible way, and from what we can see, a much earlier response to COVID. So we're in 8 different countries, so we see very significant differences across all those different countries, and we're monitoring them on a development and construction basis. To kind of characterize this, there was an interesting report that came out from the IEA saying that energy demand was down 20%, and that the brunt of that, actually what they said is the profile of energy consumption looks like a Sunday. So it looks like we've had 3 months of Sundays. Every day is another Sunday. There's no spike back up on the Monday. And we've seen coal take the vast brunt of the loss. So coal production on a global basis is down 7%. Gas is down, I think, about 2-3%. And the only energy that's up is renewable. So the really great thing for everybody to hear is that the marginal cost to run a solar plant is zero. It's easier to keep the plant on and operating than it is to turn it off, which is very different compared to all the other plants. So that's been a very positive impact. So we think that COVID overall is going to accelerate the usage of green power. Way we look at it now is a credit impact. So one of the things that we're looking at is looking at the different sectors. We take very long-term views on our customers. We expect to be working with them for 10 or 20 years. So the question is really who's going to be impacted. And then I saw one question on the system that was saying sort of what loss of income do you have from facilities in March and April? What's the impact? How does the PPA cover you? So the way that the PPA is structured is really important, and I think that's one of the concerns we have with the curtailment. And actually, if you look at those 4 business models that were put out earlier this year, one of them explicitly said, we can change the price whenever we like, we can curtail whenever we like, and that's just impossible for an investor to take a long-term view. With a rooftop project, we're 10 to 20% of the consumption of the building. We're not 100%. So if that building sees consumption drop 10%, 20%, 50%, it's still not going to touch our demand. So generally, across all of our customers, across all the different countries, we aren't seeing a significant impact from that.
That's fantastic. Very good insights. Would Milan or Duck like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I can add quickly. So the question is whether there is going to be impact on the energy tariffs. I think yes, there is going to be, but that's going to be short term. And I think long term, COVID will be basically forgotten as everything else. So what we see is right now a little bit unpredictable future short term by the end of this year. But a lot of countries are moving back to normal, and I think with this outbreak, what people realized is that there is no black and white. There is no total lockdown or total freedom. There is the balance between how not to hurt the economy significantly and how to keep people alive. So yeah, I think country per country, things are getting back to normal, and that's going to apply for every industry. Getting back to the top of the pyramid, which is the travel industry. I think everything will be back to normal rather soon.
Great, thank you very much. Usually I think I'm usually the optimist in the room, but it's good to hear such positive views at this time from everyone. And I think that's a very, very powerful statement. It does seem, as Gavin mentioned, that the renewable energy industry is showing resilience. I saw the IEA report as well, and glad to see that's happening on the ground here. I'm a little bit worried that 3 months of Sundays, I'm hoping we're not going to have 3 months of Mondays coming up next. I think that would be terrible, but
just to add on to your statement, if you can, in terms of specifically apply for rooftop, if you look into my presentation before, so the development of the rooftop market seems to have very small impact from COVID-19, because it still keep the development speed of more than 12 or more, let's say it's like more than about 50 megawatt peak per COD per month. I would expect there will be a slight impact from the COVID-19 if we have the number of rooftop installation by end of May or end of June, because there will maybe some delay of the due to the lockdown. But I think just because of the new decision that we're all looking for more than 9 months, so it will compensate with any adverse impact from COVID-19. And luckily for this time, the government of Vietnam has done a really good job.
Great, thank you. That seems like the case. So good, actually. So building on that optimistic note, and again, Duc and some other people's earlier comments about this really is the first step. We're trying things out now. We're in the very, very early days, first months of a sort of a modern solar rooftop industry in Vietnam. And we've seen some significant growth in this region. India's had a booming market. Thailand really has been taking off over the last couple of years, and people do expect Vietnam perhaps is going to be the next star of the show. So what I want to do is ask the presenters if they agree with that categorization. Is Vietnam the next market to show some real growth? And how do you see things developing after this first stage? What will happen with the EVN offtake? Will this continue to be the way that it works, where people are able to package together own use with some offtake? And then what about over 1 megawatt projects? Is there any prospects for easing those, or any other positives that would drive the sector? So just a look from any of the presenters on what happens after this successful first step.
Well, okay, just go ahead.
So Gavin here. I think definitely this is a key market for us. We see this is a core focus, and we're really gearing up to deploy more resources and people and partners in this sector. So I suppose the factors that we're looking at are, one is grid price. So where do we see the grid price going? And if we see the same thing that we're seeing in Indonesia, where subsidies are reducing and we get closer to the real cost of power, that will be that will encourage. And then excess, and for me it seems strange to reduce excess sales to 1 megawatt. Quite frankly, I would be looking to see that opened up. Though maybe the price is going to come down, right? So I would rather, from my perspective, I would rather as a government have any excess sales up to 5 megawatts or 10 megawatts, but maybe the feed-in tariff might be lower.
Okay. And Ron, I think you had something to add to that.
Yeah, for me, just like what I have addressed earlier, I think no matter what whatever the incentive is, it is always a positive sign. Which means that it's the market is moving, and people talking about EVN, how tough it is. Actually, it's everywhere. I mean, in the world, regulation always tough. But as long as we overcome that, I think it's just very bright future waiting for us. Because just a few things. I mean, we have seen some of the other countries might be stepping a little bit forward before Vietnam. However, look at the size, the population of Vietnam. Looking at the economic growth. Also look at the grid capacity of Vietnam, it's really a long-term market, long-term substantial market. Just waiting for solar. Um, I will be very optimistic on this market, and also I still believe um, rooftop. Well, we look at. I think people are comparing with the Thailand or India, but I think each market is very unique. Vietnam market somehow on the residential and on the rooftop side, I think even a little bit like Australia. I think when we seeing tremendous installation in Australia with just 20,000, 20 million people, something. When you look at Vietnam, so it's definitely going to be bigger market. So I just feel that all the people we should be a little bit patient, but also we're going to be jointly working towards the future.
Great.
So Milan here. I think Vietnam will remain the third biggest market in Asia after China and India for a long time. There is all the macroeconomic factors leading to this argument. In terms of rooftop, it largely depends on again how long this feed-in tariff will continue, and at some point in time, all these credible factories will be covered by solar. So investors will probably have to start looking at tier 2 or tier 3 factories, which are probably not AAA in terms of their bankability. But that's a significant market. That's probably tens of gigawatts. All those local Vietnamese manufacturers or rather smaller international ones that are based in Vietnam. So again, next 5 years, definitely within top 3 in Asia, and the biggest in Southeast Asia.
And I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Gavin. So I was going to ask that definitely need to be on off mute so you can all hear me. I was going to ask Duke, one of the reasons I started this question is a comment you'd made about this being the first step. Anything you'd like to add to what we've heard so far?
Thanks, Jack. Actually, people are giving all of my thought and ideas, including the development, the growth of the economic growth, and also the expectation that there might be several gigawatt peak of installation will come down in maybe the next 4 to 5 years. And because I also believe and want to promote the rooftop development in Vietnam because of the basic nature of a distributed photovoltaic system that not only it helps reduce the load demand, the load peak, but they also have to increase the generation. So it will be a win-win-win story for EVN, for the developers, and for the factories. So to be honest, the development is foreseen, and the expectation out there. We just need to jointly show our hands to uplift or scale up the market. And it's not for the rooftop. It does not really needs to depends on the feed-in tariff programs, which we might end by end of this year. And also there might be some expectation that it will be extended in the next 2 years, similar to some proposal of wind projects, but have a lower feed-in tariff. But the rooftop can system can live on their own, even without any applicable feed-in tariff. They still can be workable and achievable upon the for the, let's say, it's like the self-consumption purpose. So I believe that it is clear that the rooftop market will booming here in Vietnam, and I also expect that maybe end of 2025 there will be roughly from 4 to 5 gigawatt of installation. But the market is more major than this moment.
Great. So let me ask another very quick question and see if everyone agrees with that general size forecast of around 4 or 5 megawatts, and that does seem like the way the market's heading. The question I had, or the angle I want to ask on that is, we've seen in more mature markets that, unlike the large utility scale solar, utility scale wind, where you need a feed-in tariff, you need concessions, you need a government to make it move forward, and absent that, we have developers sitting and waiting for each country to move forward. Rooftop is really more like a conventional business. It can break loose and it can run as far as the economics let it run. So I wanted to ask, and I think Duc started to answer the question, is Vietnam poised to allow just an open competitive market where people can procure, and I don't mean at a macro market level, I mean for solar rooftops. Will there be, can this just run on the economics going forward, and is that what will carry this through to the 4 or 5 gigawatt or whatever size it will reach?
Last year, as please correct me if I'm wrong, the World Bank has stated that the economic growth of Vietnam is around or a bit less than 7%, and for electricity, the demand increased about 12%, and with the average of 12% in the last 5 to 7 years. So, which means our current generation cannot be. Let me remember it a little bit. The development or the increase of our generation is around from 10 to 11%. So it's less than the increase of low demand, which means the government of Vietnam needs to mobilize more investment on the new energy development. So would they expect more and more investment from the private sectors to overcome the foreseen power energy shortage? So that's the reason why I believe in the next 4 to 5 years there will be more and more investment in the energy sectors, and especially for the rooftop, where the nature, as I told you, is the win-win for every stakeholder in Vietnam. And to be honest, I have been discussing with a lot of developers and even the factory owner and very notable brands who are willing to put their the factories of their vendor to install rooftop. Which each of the brands, the total install capacity could be 40 to 50 megawatt peaks. And I believe there have been dozens of them have approached me on my program for both the rooftop and other alternative solution to achieve their commitment for environmental commitment for the renewable energies. And apologize, Jackson and everyone. I have a very limited bandwidth for today, only next 2 to 5 minutes to answer the question, because I have another important meeting starting at 4 p.m. Vietnam time.
Okay, so I know you had told us that constraint. I'm very happy you've been able to join us for this long, and thank you very much for your comments. What I might do is, given the fact that you have a few more minutes left, if there's anything else that you think we've missed so far, or you think there's a question you'd like to add before you head out, maybe take a minute or two and answer that. Otherwise, we just probably have a few more questions to go forward, and we'll move to wrap this up in the next 20 minutes or so.
Well, I think the mentioned question is good at my end. But any specific question or specific topics that anyone want to discuss, you can contact me directly in case when I run out.
Okay, fantastic. I think everybody will very much appreciate your availability. I think your presentation and comments have been fantastic and very helpful, and I'm sure people will take advantage of that opportunity to follow up with you. So thank you very much for that. So what I may then do is to go on to another question that did come up from the audience, and it's one that I have as well, and it's probably on a lot of our minds, is sort of, Gavin mentioned energy storage, and others have as well. It seems sort of in the core business right now, as long as you can export to EVN, it seems tough to see how energy storage can make a break into the pure energy supply aspect of it. But I wanted to ask you if how you see energy storage developing. Are there sort of niche markets? Are there off-grid or special circumstances? Or do things like 100% renewable energy movement, where companies want to generate all the all the renewable energy themselves rather than procuring it, are those important drivers? So I guess, where do you see energy storage? How far away is it? And what niches or what applications drive that?
Yeah. If I dive in first, and Jack, I've got to admit, I've also got a 5 o'clock sort of hard stop. So unfortunately, I probably need to drop off after this. But we as Total, you're really looking for scale. So one of the questions we had is, can we get enough scale on off-grid projects? And I think up until in the last sort of 7 years that I've been looking at Southeast Asia, I haven't seen it. Like, most of the projects have been smaller. We're doing a 2 megawatt battery with a 1.2 megawatt rooftop project in a Cambodian island. And yes, it's a bit smaller than most of our projects, but there's so much value there, right? The cost of diesel is so high, you can give the customer such a significant discount. For the hotels and leisure and sort of travel sector, they have real problems with diesel at night, keeping people awake. So I think there's a lot of value there, and then the returns are okay. So I would imagine that we'll see more off-grid, and that's not just sort of that's not just islands. That's also off-grid businesses. So we see fisheries, we see canneries, we see businesses that are really off the grid, needing energy as much as they can. But you're absolutely right. Like, when you have the option to sell into the grid and use the grid as your kind of virtual battery, there's nothing to compete with that. The customers, to Duke's comment, we have a lot of customers who say, great, you've given me 10% of my power or 20% of my power. What do I do for 100% if I need to go 100%? And I think the DPPA structure is a great model if that can get up and running. But for me, the biggest issue is the bit that I think people kind of maybe don't always recognize is the transmission and the distribution, and that is what really holds back. I mean, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, everywhere. That's the bit that's expensive and slow to upgrade.
Yeah. Okay. Would anyone else like to add to that?
Right. I think for Vietnam, so far I would say a lot of people interested in the storage solutions, but still a niche market. But if you look at global picture, I think storage, we have seen a kind of breaking point which has come. For instance, last year we almost more than double our revenue. We see a lot of countries, because for storage it's quite interesting. Just now, Gavin just mentioned off-grid, but off-grid is only one of the scenarios that you need hybrid. And you need the storage. You can have some places where really short of the power, then like island and so on, then you just need the purely off-grid. but you also could have in the place where you have grid, but very weak grid or unstable grid, in which you also need the hybrid storage solution. And you also could have the in countries like Europe, even in Germany, where you see different pricing scheme, workable people storing the electricity in the battery and to use with the best time. It's also large volume. So I think there are a lot of occasions where you could have the storage. By the way, storage. It's also, no matter when you look at small scale on the residential or you look at utility scale, you have also, kind of frequency fine tuning functionality there to be somehow the supplementary part of the grid or, the solar system. So in the long run, we see, particularly when people, if you are in the solar business for long, you cannot imagine how drastically the pricing was dropping, right? So it will be very similar to the battery storage solution as well. People are running so many manufacturers now increasing efficiency and putting more volume production on the battery. And we also, as an inverter manufacturer, we are also working on the high efficiency inverters to accommodate for the need. But eventually, it's also a concept of grid parity, right? If you look at the, where you have EV at your home, where you have EV charge, then you have your storage, all this could be combined. When we are reaching at the point, it makes economic sense, then it's going to be massive volume. And we believe that one day it will come, even though in Vietnam still at the beginning, but we also see a very promising future in this regard.
Great, fantastic. So internally, I know we'd actually set a bit of a longer time. The webinar could keep going, but I know we did tell the audience and tell everybody 2 hours, and that's the limit our presenters have. So I think what I will do is to move to wrap this up while we're all here, so I can give a direct thanks to Gavin, to Rong, to Milan, and Duc. Thank you all very, very much for attending what I found to be an extremely informative event and a great question and answer. I think in particular, it was really nice for me to have such an optimistic view at this time when there's a lot of doubt. I think it's very exciting to hear what's happening in Vietnam and hear what all of you are doing. So I wish I could ask for a round of applause, but you'll have to take a virtual round of applause. But please do take my sincere thanks for all of your support. Also, thank GoodWe for sponsoring the event and PV Box and Energy Box for continuing to organize such great forum like this. I hope this is the beginning of a discussion, and we can all make some contacts and follow up and enjoy success in Vietnam and other markets going forward. So thank you, the audience. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.